evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Earth House. I am Augustus Henry Fox Lane Pitt-Rivers, at your service, General, owner of the Rushmore Estate for the latter part of my life. And I shall be your host for tonight's contest, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this, for a lifelong collector such as myself, is beyond my wildest dreams. The finest collection I could possibly have. You see, sparing no expense, we have brought across time and space 5 of the most illustrious members of the Cranborne Chase community over the past 1,000 years. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, 1,000 years. Each is to be considered by yourselves to decide who should be most remembered for what they have done for this beautiful chase of ours. So there is indeed a role for your good selves. You will be the judges. Each of us will have the opportunity to address you first, and after that, you may ask questions. Refreshments will be provided in the long pavilion next door. And after that, you will return for your questions, and finally tonight, you will give your verdict on who is the worthiest of us. So, without further ado, latecomers are accepted. However, do find yourselves a seat. We're just beginning. I am going to present to you your 5 contestants. First of all, we must begin with the highest in status. Ladies and gentlemen, from the 11th century, please welcome Queen Matilda. Matilda lived from 1031 to 1083 and was married to no less a personage than William the Conqueror, soldier king who ended the Saxon era in our land with an unsurpassed show of might. Now, what you perhaps don't know is that Matilda was more than a match for her conquering husband. She held many lands in her own right across the county and in the Cranborne Chase. Queen Matilda. Next, a leap of some 600 years to Chettle. Anyone here from Chettle? Oh, someone nearly put their hand up. Ladies and gentlemen, George Chafin, MP, owner of Chettle House. The fine brick mansion between Blandford and Sixpenny Hanley. A long-standing member of Parliament for his ward, he was also a marathon equestrian and a crack shot to boot, as you will hear. George Chafin lived from 1689 to 1766, but you shall meet him in 1749 at the age of 60. Mr. Chafin. Our third contestant is a woman of mystery and merchandise. She lived in Sixpenny Hanley and straddled the 18th and 19th centuries. Mrs. Elizabeth Gulliver, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, she was wife to the famous gentleman, free trader, smuggler, let us make no bones about it, Isaac Gulliver, whose empire stretched from Lyme Regis in the west to Christchurch in the east. But as you will hear, Mrs. Gulliver was a highly successful businesswoman alongside her husband Isaac. She lived from 1740 to 1830. Mrs. Gulliver. Now, our fourth contestant was Mrs. Maria Ridout. I hope I pronounced that right, my lady. Ridout.
I don't know why I'm here, though.
Do stand. Do stand like everyone else. Show your face. Show your face, my dear.
It's all these here.
Mrs. Ridout is from the 19th century, as indeed am I. She was a very industrious carrier of the Cranborne chess, well known in all these parts to rich and poor for her unstinting errands to and from Salisbury. A delightful portrait of her may be observed by visiting the Salisbury Museum. Mrs. Ridout lived from 1814 to 1886. Mrs. Ridout, ladies and gentlemen. And to your final challenger, yours truly. General Augustus Fox Pitt-Rivers, as I've said, former military officer with expertise in the history of weaponry, collector, ethnologist, archaeologist, born in Yorkshire in 1827 and moved to Dorset in his 50s. Late in life, when he inherited the title. When I inherited the title, of which later more. Now to the contest. Our musician. Each contestant will speak for 10 minutes in turn. After their time has elapsed, Mrs. Limb will ring the bell in this manner. We all hear the bell. That's good. Very good. Very good, Mrs. Limb. Well rung. Now then, I've told you about the intermission already. Over that, let's begin. Pray silence for Queen Matilda, our first speaker this evening. Thank you.
I, Matilda, Regina Anglorum, e comitissa nominorum este nominorum, Queen of England and Duchess of Normandy and Maine, warmly greet you. And here in this rustic place, well, I greet you not only as your queen, but also as your lord and tenant-in-chief, because your feet rest upon the ground that belongs to me. The land of Cranborne, amongst many other lands, was gifted to me by my husband, William, first of his name, when he became king in 1066. Now I wish you greetings on this May Day. And May is my favourite month, for May is when I was crowned Queen of England at Winchester. Perhaps some of you came to my coronation. Did you come? Yes? Not far to go if you live around here. But for me, it was the pinnacle of my life up to that point. No, it didn't happen in 1066. William's coronation was hurried on Christmas Day and in Westminster. But it was another 2 years in 1068 when I came across on the boat to be crowned on that illustrious day. And how far I had come. For as a young woman in the court of my father, Count Baldwin of Flanders, it was a hub where people from the Saxons came, the Frankians came, the Normans came, everyone came and did business in our court. And so I had a great upbringing. And my mother, who was the sister of the King of France, she was very insistent that I had a good education. Monks and nuns taught me I could speak many languages and I could listen to the business that went on in our court. for I was a child destined for a high office in life, either a countess or a thane's wife, or even perhaps an abbess. For as much as we ply the thread and weave what we can and work our way forward, sometimes, and most of the time, it is because of the grace of God that we find ourselves where we do. Now, it is true that when I was a young, excitable, keen to make my mark in the world, that in our court, well, there was one Saxon thane who was most interesting to talk to. And we would talk about, here in Wessex, he would talk about his journeys and travels around as ambassador to the good King Edward the Confessor. And I have to say, he took an interest in me. And I took an interest in him, keen to perhaps step into my independence from my parents. Well, I sent him a letter suggesting that we might meet, a letter suggesting that perhaps I might be a good match for him. He rejected my offer. It was a scandal, not that you would have heard about it, because my parents were very good at shutting down any gossip at the time. But as you can imagine, they were slightly angry with me. They had higher hopes for me. And indeed, a few years later, I was told I would have a new husband. I would be married to William. Now, I at first was not that happy with it, for William, well, he was the son of Robert of Normandy, but he was not married to his father was not married to the mother, Helena. And so, did I want to marry an illegitimate son? But when I met him, all thoughts of that disappeared, for I met somebody with a will, a ferocious will and an ambition to seek all fame and glory for Normandy. He was a soldier. He was a great military man, for he had been fighting since he was 7 years old when his father died, and he was left surrounded by sharks who would see him taken down. So he had been fighting all his young life. And he had been given a promise by Edward the Confessor. For Edward and his wife Edith had had no children, and Edward had no heir. And Edward, who when he had spent his time in exile, had been embraced by the Normans, had grown up in the court, so William's father and Edward were like blood brothers. Edward had named William as his heir. So he should have just been made king without a battle of Hastings. He should have just been made king in 1066 in January when Edward died. But not for the Godwinsons of Wessex. Harold took the throne, took the crown. He went back on an oath that he had sworn on holy relics when he came to us in Normandy, that he would support William's claim to be heir. But William vowed that he would be heir and he would take the crown. And so it was, you all know the history. When he left on the ship that I had built for him from my own money, my own wealth, he sailed and he landed at Hastings, and, well, I wasn't there. I was in my abbey, Saint Trinité, that I had founded, and I was praying, for we all move forward by the grace of God. I was praying for his success. So 2 years later, I am brought over and crowned. And it is a time of great celebration, great pomp and ceremony. And of course we had the ceremony at Winchester. That was where Edward Confessor was crowned. And even though that William was illegitimate, I carried the noble blood, the status, for through my father Baldwin, my blood goes back to Charlemagne. And through my mother, then I have the blood of the royal French family. But most importantly, for the people here, and especially the people of Wessex, I have Saxon blood running through my veins. My great, 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 great grandmother was Elftrude, King Alfred the Great's youngest daughter. So when I stood there to receive the crown, then I was accepted. I received the sceptre, which was a symbol of the secular authority that I had as queen. But most importantly, I received a ring, a beautiful sapphire encased in gold, an episcopal sapphire. And this was like the bishop's ring. And this gave me authority in the church. But most importantly, as before, most importantly, for the first time ever in this country, I had the sacred anointing. I was anointed with the authority from God to rule with divine authority alongside my husband. And as it was, we ruled together. We were close, we were loyal, he trusted me. I was a good administrator. I was good at judgments. I was good at dispensing writs and charters. And while he was here, I ruled in Normandy. And when he was in Normandy, I would rule here. And we loved this area particularly. It had a history already of royal patronage, which we continued. And William had a passion for the hunt. And what he'd love to do was get off the boat at Southampton, get on a horse and ride and hunt from the moment there all the way to Salisbury or to Winchester. So it was unsurprising we created the royal forests around here. And we introduced the forest law to protect everything in that forest for our use only. We protected the Veridis Venecio, the bear and the venison. And so we moulded this landscape to our liking. And as well as hunting, William and I loved to play chess. And when we were playing chess, this was just at the beginning of time when the Queen made an appearance on the chessboard. My mother taught me to play chess. And one thing that she told me when I was young, and this was a saying from a treatise written on the rules of chess, written by a Benedictine monk. And it said, if you want to play the game, pay all attention to it. Then play it with your whole heart. This is how I have lived my life. This is how William has lived his life. And we have done so, and will do so, until our dying breath.
Thank you, Queen Matilda, for that illuminating beginning to our evening. Well, we are now going to move forward to our second speaker from a later time. in the 18th century. Mr. George Chafin, sir, the floor is yours.
Very good. Yes, as has been mentioned, I am the MP for Dorset, and I have been an MP for Dorset for, well, in this year, 1749, I've been for, nearly 40 years, an MP. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for mentioning my horse skills. Did you know, for all this time, I've been riding to London on my horse? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So thank you very much for mentioning. Yes, I am a bit of a crackpot with my gun. I was trying to teach my son, by the way, to use a gun, and unfortunately, he had an accident and shot a woman called Mrs. Goody dead. I'm sure she was in the way. I don't quite know what happened. She was probably out foraging or something like that, and he shot her. But I did duly punish the boy. I put him in the cellar for a month with just some bread and water. He's got a keen idea for hunting, you know, and as has been mentioned, hunting has been very important. You didn't mention, Mr. Chairman, that I have been the ranger here, the head ranger of Cranborne Chase, the whole of Cranborne Chase. Now, a lot of people say, well, what is a head ranger? What does he do? Oh, by the way, I don't get paid for being an MP. I must tell you that now. I don't get paid. Well, it's all right. You know, I have to go there myself, and I just take care of all the expenses. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. So, I'm head ranger. Now, people ask, what is head ranger? Well, it is. I'm in charge of it all, really. You know, you know what I mean. The forests and the hunting has been mentioned. You see, because obviously there are a lot of poachers and around, and they have to be taken care of, and also. So I like forests, and do you know there's hundreds of thousands of sheep in Dorset? In fact, my family has been involved in the wool industry for many years. Many years. It goes back a long way. The wool industry, and so we need shepherds and so on, and I take care of that as well. And I defend it with my life. Do you know my family has been involved with defending not only this area, but this country. My father, well, he died when I was only 2 years old. He fought off the Duke of Monmouth, who made an entrance at Lyme Regis. Yes, entered there from Lyme Regis. Now, who was the Duke of Monmouth? Well, he was an illegitimate son of Charles II, and he felt he should be entitled to the throne. And, that wasn't the case. And, of course, it became known as the Pitchfork Rebellion, and many joined, farmers joined, and perhaps the punishments were harsh. Many were hanged and put in gibbets and so on, and some were deported, slightly harsh. But that's the law. The law is the law. So, my father... Yes, he was with the Duke, fighting off the Duke of Monmouth. My grandfather was in the English Civil War. And again, we've tried to defend. I'm a royalist. I am a royalist. And not only that, as a Tory MP, I'm not a Whig, by the way. I'm a Tory MP. And the difference is that I, too, believe in the divine right of God, of the divine right of kings for God. They're there for God. God is the most important, and the kings have the divine right. In fact, I was asked sometime to join the Jacobite revolution. You see, I wish that a Stuart would come back to the throne. And this year, of course, 1749 is the 100th anniversary of the execution of our King Charles. His head was severed from his body. Gruesome. And such a groan fell from the crowd when they witnessed this terrible execution. There were no cheers. No cheers. That just shows how tragic it was. What a time in our history. that we execute a king. And he was very brave. I know this because some of my relatives, of course, fought in the English Civil War and were there at the execution and saw, and they said that the king was very brave. He came out and took off. In fact, you know, this cape here belonged to my grandfather. He was in the English Civil War. You see this cape here, this cloak and coat? And they said that he was brave. He took off his cloak. He wore 2 shirts because he did not want to appear frightened. And he put his head on the block. He was executed. And our family here in this very area that you are now sitting in, we fought hard and long. Terrible conditions. So my family have been involved in battles, and the Chafins have always been men of their word. Being a head ranger, I have to stand by my word, and I tell you a story about how I am a man of my word. Some time ago, I was walking around the area and I saw this rather strange character. Burly sort of fellow, but pretty grim, nasty sort of chap. I thought he was a poacher. I said, "Sir, what are you doing here?" Because he was beating around and looking very suspicious. I didn't trust him at all. And he said, "Sir, I'm a game warden." A game warden? What? I'd never really known anything about that. And I thought, well, look, I am supposed to be in charge of all this, aren't I? Aren't I supposed to be the head ranger? Aren't you supposed to seek permission first? You see, hunting is very important in this area. It all has to be carefully managed. My son's a great hunter. Yes, even if you're hunting owls, you must be very careful and we don't want to get rid of all of them, do we? But my son, yes, he likes to hunt very much so. In fact, when he was in the basement, in the base there, and he still hunted sparrows. So I said to him, "Sir, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm the game warden." And I said, "And this is why I am a man of my word." I said to him, "Sir," I called him sir, he should have called me sir, of course, trying to be polite. I said, "If I see you here again," he's with his dogs, beautiful dogs. They were hunting dogs. They were setters, nice black and white dogs. 3 of them, fine animals. I could have shot him, of course. I had my gun with me, but I said to him, "I'm going to prosecute you, sir. I will prosecute you. And next time I see you, if I see you here again, I will shoot your dogs." I see the reaction from you, you see. I see the reaction, that you are appalled by that. But I must admit I was rather heated at the time and I didn't know anything about these game wardens. What are they? I didn't know. Gamekeepers, what are they? I don't know. So, sure enough, some days later, I saw the same man in the distance. And I prepared my gun, which I have to prepare, of course. Putting the powder in the... And I was ready with my gun in the pan. And I went up to him and I said, "Sir, I warned you that I would shoot your dogs." And it just so happened that these 3 dogs were by a puddle, 3 heads together. And I shot those dogs. Because that is a man of my word. It didn't end there. He then said, "I'm going to go to my lord and I'm going to tell him what you've just done, sir." And he went to his lord, Lord Doddington, who actually was a Whig. And he challenged me to a duel. So I had a sword specially made, and I was ready to defend and go to have this duel. But as it turned out, my good friend, Jacob Banks, went to see Doddington, and he was in a completely different frame of mind. and we didn't have the duel, but I was prepared to do so. That is how much I defend your Dorset and my Dorset. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chafin, for making his point of view so very clear to you all, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we will now move on to our next speaker. This is Elizabeth Gulliver, née Beale, who is going to stake her claim with you all tonight. Mrs. Beale, the floor is yours. Mrs. Gulliver, I should say. Apologise.
The pub trade is all that I have ever known. As you've said, I'm Elizabeth Gulliver and I was born in an inn not far from here. The Blacksmith's Arms, over at Sixpenny Handley. Maybe you know it. It was my father's inn. He was an innkeeper, amongst other trades. And I learned everything that I know at my father's apron strings because I had to look after that pub as soon as I was old enough. I learned not to speak everything you see, to mind your manners as best you can, and how to throw a grown man out of the pub when he's had a few too many to drink, because there's more to running a pub than just pouring the drinks. You've got to be canny and you've got to be clever. I can count, read and write well, more than many of the young women in Sixpenny Handley can. Yes, you've got to be canny to run a smuggler's pub. Little did I know how useful this would be before I married Mr. Isaac Gulliver. I remember that day when he first came into the pub. He had bright eyes and great stories. I mean, I was immune to a lot of the charms of the fellas that came in there, but there was something about Isaac. He was a gentleman, and a flame soon kindled between us. It wasn't long, actually, until we were married. Now, Father wasn't happy about it because he thought that this young upstart, 23-year-old, I was a little bit older than him, was just after getting his hands on his pub. He could sense Isaac's ambition, and he was not wrong there. We were married up at St Mary's Church, up at Sixpenny Handley, and Isaac made sure that I had some of the finest French lace for my wedding dress. It was a memorable day, and I wrote my own name. And after that time, well, Isaac, he came to live with us in the Blacksmith's Arms. It's a little bit tense at first because of the father situation, but it didn't take long until Isaac and my father were working together in the trade. You know, smuggling, tea, tobacco, wine, brandy, lace. They had to be so careful. But with Isaac's energy and my practical skills and inside knowledge, business soon began to boom at the inn. But smuggling is a dangerous game. It's against the law. And we had to watch out for the revenue men, the king's men, the excise men, the land sharks, whatever it is you want to call them. Because if they're going to get you, you could get thrown in jail, beaten up, or hung by your neck at the gallows until you are dead. And why were we smuggling? Well, it's the king, isn't it? King George III and his taxes, his high taxes that he wants to take off the ordinary folk of Cranborne Chase, who are already surviving on the lowest wages with barely a bite to eat. And he wants to take their taxes for what? For his wars with France. I mean, tax, it's such a complicated business, isn't it? Any of you here pay tax? Any of you understand tax? I mean, you know, say for example, madam, say for example, you know, you are a rope maker and you sell a little bit of tea on the side, you know, just to make a bit of extra for your family. Well, you buy the tea for a penny, you sell it to me for 5p. You have got to give 3p of that to the king, leaving you with hardly anything to make ends meet. Just for his wars. So we had no choice. Do you think the people that were working with Isaac and us wanted to be out day and night smuggling. Wasn't our choice. It was our choice, and we chose to take it. But we did have to be very careful of the revenue men, to stay one step ahead of them. But we were successful business people. My husband Isaac, he had 15 luggers, those swift, sturdy ships that sail across the channel that can carry heavy goods. And then, when they arrive on the shores, they trade with France, with Holland, with Spain and Portugal, sometimes even as far as the West Indies, bringing in the goods to the beaches, and at night taking those bales of baccy and barrels of brandy off from the beaches, through the fields and the forests, right far inland up here, up to Cranborne Chase. And if ever you saw a man with white powder in his hair, well, you would know that that was one of Isaac's men, the Whitewigs they were called. And in all of my husband's dangerous escapades and encounters with the revenue men, he never killed a man. He was a gentleman smuggler, and he was called the king of the smugglers. But whether you're married to the king of the smugglers or an ordinary tubman, there is no wife that has not spent a worrisome night full of fear and dread that you would never see them alive again. But the money rolled in, and houses, farms and pubs were bought, and I lived in houses I would never have dreamt of when I was growing up in the Blacksmith's Arms. And Isaac, after a time, he began to ease up on the smuggling, particularly after the proclamation that King George gave in the 1817, that he gave, and it was the proclamation pardoning such offences. And Isaac took good advantage of that, because it meant it would let him get rid of all the crimes that he had had so far. Nearly, he stopped. Slowed down, let us say. But the time did come when he gave up smuggling, and we moved to Wimborne. Opened a wine shop there. And in those days, the tunnels underneath the town, they were more used for storage than hiding out from the revenue men. But time passes. The body weakens and dreams change. But the mind can stay strong. I've outlived my husband. He died in 1822 at the age of 77. He lived a good life, Isaac Gulliver. He helped thousands of people across the Chase. He gave them work. He gave them money. He gave them friendship and community. And he was never caught. He was never, ever betrayed by his people. And when we moved to Wimborne in his last days, he worked for the Wimborne Minster, helping with the people in the town, giving them what they needed. And that is where he is buried today. And in his will, there was no shortage of money and houses to go round to the family. He had amassed, we had amassed, a vast fortune, albeit on the wrong side of the law. He was known as the gentleman smuggler, the man who never killed a man, the king of the smugglers, but he was my beloved husband for over 50 years. I miss him. Isaac Gulliver. He was unstoppable.
I think we should add to that. I think we should add that you, Mrs. Gulliver, were also unstoppable.
That I may be.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening very, very well, and you're obviously taking your role as judges seriously. This is good to see. Good to see. Very good. Next, for our fourth speaker, this good lady here, Mrs. Ridout. She is going to stake her claim, and we will all listen and wait for the bell.
Well, I don't feel I got much of a claim. I don't know what I can say to you, really. You welcome. Nice to meet you. Are you going to the market? Or perhaps you'd like me to deliver something for you, or fetch something for you. That's what I do. I'm a carrier. I carry things from place to place. I don't carry them on my back, mind you. No, I've got a cart, and I hitch it up to two donkeys, Jack and Jane, I call them. And, well, we make ourselves on a journey, all the way from Coombe, Bissett, all the way across the Chase to Salisbury, to the market. The Coombe Express. That's what they call us. I think it's a joke, really, because we're very fast. We're slow and steady. Aye, take it nice and easy. Sure enough, always out and about. Sun or wind, rain or snow. All year round I go. Nothing stops me getting through. There goes Maria Ridout, they say. Always out and about. She's as reliable as the sunrise. That's me. Would you like me to deliver a message? You'd like to send a letter, would you? To someone special? Yes, oh, love you can rely on me. Don't bother with the post. I'm much more dependable, and I know how to keep a secret and all. Aye, indeed. Sure enough. I love to see the change in seasons, don't you? Such a joy when spring bursts through after a long, cold winter. The green shoots bursting through the earth, and the blooming flowers, and the birds nesting in the trees. Up the hills, down the hills, past the lanes and the fields, I make my way. There goes Maria Ridout, they say, always out and about. She's as reliable as the sunrise. Sure enough, though, can be thirsty work, carrier's business. So I'd always make sure I find a good pub before I set off. Shoulder and Mutton is on Bridge Street. We like to stop there for a refreshment. I say we, because Jane and Jack, they like a pint too. Well, it's better than the water, eh? And it's not too strong. Aye, indeed, goes down well. Sure enough. It's a long old journey to get to the market. And sometimes, like sir, if any's you's feeling a little unwell, well, I can take you on the back of the cart, wrap you up in a blanket, get you there to the doctor safe and sound. Don't you worry. But the marketplace, even though I was tired, it's a busy place. And I love to see all the familiar faces. Oh, after all me deliveries are done, sure enough, I go and get what I need. Here, there's the piemen. How are you, sir? And how are your little ones and your missus? I'll have 10 of your best to take to Stratford Tony. Thanking you. Now, who was it? Was it your husband, dear, who'd suffered from the gout? I got some news for the doctor. Now, what was it? Oh, tell him to cut down on the oysters and the cheese and the pork. And that should make him a bit better. Or if you struggle, cherry pie. Very good for gout is a cherry pie. Sure enough. Aye, indeed. I have such fun there with the donkeys. The children love them. And after I've got all the provisions, it's time to make my way home to Long Cottage in Coombe, Bissett. Of course, you've got to trust me with your money. I'll bring you back your change and all your provisions, and I won't charge you until I return. That's fair, isn't it? That's fair, isn't it? It's a bit funny standing here talking like so. I was a bit nervous at first, but I sort of got into the swing of things there. Describing it all to you. But I mean, what's I doing here? Amongst royalty and being remembered. Being remembered for being me. But it happened. This young gentleman, a portrait painter, he painted me, Maria Ridout, and the donkeys. And sometimes later, he wrote a letter to the newspaper, no less, the Times. Here, I kept a copy for to read at any time and opportunity. I can read and write. My husband, Robert Ridout, he taught me. It took me some time, but I persevered. And it meant when anyone needed me to write down in detail in the little black book, I had it all there written. Some can't read or write. Such a thing, isn't it, eh? To read a poem or to read news. I was most grateful to him, I am. Here. My attention has been called to several letters both interesting and amusing in your paper with regard to an old friend of mine of the 1870s, a friend. I was then beginning my career as an artist and looking about for something to paint. The old lady and her donkeys struck me as an attractive and picturesque subject, so I thought I would try and paint a picture of her. I used to meet her at Farnham Bridge. You been there? Oh, you must get there. Very pretty. When she was leaving the town, as she always made a stop at the old and picturesque inn called the Swan for a last refresher for herself and the donkeys, generally. I think from the same jug, yes. Here I began my sketches. I often walked with her to Coombe, and the pace was such that at times I was able to walk backwards and roar. Hence the name she was so well known by. The background for the picture I sketched about halfway to Coombe, looking back along the old road, with Harlem Folly in the distance. The old lady, of course, went by what was then called the New Road. I wasn't even that old then. You can go and see me and Jack and Jane. Turned out to be a lovely day. As you reach the top of the hill, you can see for miles all around. Clouds scudding by, and the birds singing in the hedgerows. All year round I go. No one stops me getting through. There goes Maria, they call. Good old Maria Ridout. Always out and about. She's as reliable as the sunrise.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard from four of our contestants, and I hope you will agree how varied their lives have been to show us the kind of people who have lived in the Cranborne chase. And as a military man, It reminds me how important it is to listen to the stories of ordinary people as well as those who are a little bit more higher up in social status. So it comes to my story before our interval. My story began in Yorkshire many years ago. As a young man, I went to Sandhurst and joined the army and fought with the Royal Grenadiers in the Crimea, specifically in the Battle of Alma. I began to be interested in weaponry at that time. Now, we have not long. You have heard a lot already. I'm not going to tell you too much about my military career. I did receive honours for my part in the Battle of Alma, which was very dangerous. We lost many men, but we did vanquish in the end. However, I would rather talk to you about my relationship with this area, the Cranborne Chase. Now, I am an outsider, unlike most of these good people you have heard from. I only came here when I was in my 50s. It happened very strangely, you see. A distant relative, a cousin, was the last Pitt-Rivers owner of Rashmore Estate. I was way down the list. I think there were 8 before me, so I never thought that I would possibly end up with the title. However, after several mortalities to the male members of the Pitt-Rivers family, and the women sadly not giving birth, so it befell that I was offered the estate, which came with rather a handy stipendiary, I should add, and came in very, very useful. Now, I was already very, very enthusiastic about archaeology. Have we any archaeologists here tonight with us? This gentleman there, I thought I recognised that beard, sir. Very good. Now, I became known gradually for my love of archaeology. I did a lot of work in Sussex, actually. That was where I really cut my teeth on it. I was known as the father... I expect you know this, sir. What was my title? Can you remember? No, never mind. Never mind. Thank you so much for trying. Sorry to rustle the cobwebs. I was known as the father of scientific archaeology for a very good reason, you see. I was never a gold digger like some of these treasure hunters. That's all they wanted. They wanted gold hoards, silver hoards. No, that is not the way to do the job. This I learnt in the army. You must do things properly. That taught me the value of weapons. I was particularly interested in muskets, so much so that I wrote a book about it. It's still available under plain covers. This has been used as a manual for soldiers ever since. Oh yes, I always loved weapons, and I have collected them, starting with Aboriginal boomerangs through to cannonballs, muskets, all sorts of flintlocks and other things like that. Now, and of course, it is very interesting, and it just shows us how superior our Western civilization is. But these did not happen in a swift jump. Oh no, ladies and gentlemen, they happened gradually. We learnt from our ancestors. Now, the archaeology taught me, and this wonderful area is particularly rich, as you probably know, in barrows. Any of you visited any of them? How many of you have been to War Barrow and looked there? That was one of the first I opened up in this area. Very carefully. I employed some assistants who made very careful notes and records of everything we discovered when we dug down the trenches. Now, of course, we needed a little bit more labour than I could afford with the assistants. So, another thing, very positive in my opinion, we were able to employ the labourers. Not during the growing season, of course, but once the harvests were in, then we would employ them, as many as we could, at least 30 for each dig. And they came with their brawn and their shovels and their pickaxes, and we got at it. And, you know, in 18 years, we must have opened up something like 20 different sites around this area. But carefully. At the bottom, Once we had found Saxon hoards, we found Roman coins and objects, and we also found much older things than that from the Stone Age. Oh yes, I've got 1 or 2 specimens here if we have time. At least I thought I had. What did I do with my little suitcase? I never brought it. Oh, there you go. I'm getting very forgetful. Since I got this diabetes, it's a horrible illness. It does affect me in all sorts of ways. Anyway, yes, wonderful things like that we have collected. Did you know I opened up a museum near here in Farnham? I wonder if it's still going. Has anyone been there to the museum at Farnham? Sir, you're shaking your head. What are you telling me?
It's not there anymore.
It's not there anymore? What's happened to it?
It's gone to Salisbury.
Salisbury? Well, that's not too bad, is it? Salisbury. Oh, good. Yeah. Well, I'm pleased about that, because all my other collection, and it was very prestigious, that went to Oxford, you know. It was supposed to go to the British Museum. They turned me down for some strange reason. However, Oxford will do. Oxford is a fine place. Now then, so, archaeology. Lots of local employment, and those are there for future people to find. I believe it is essential for ordinary people to be occupied, not to be allowed to brood in their own thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, because we know what happens when you do that too much, don't we? Bad for the mental health. So, apart from my archaeology around here, I also decided to build a pleasure garden. It is, oh indeed, it is called the Llama Tree Gardens. Have any of you been there?
Yes.
Oh, good. And you still see good entertainment up there?
Yes.
Good, I'm delighted to hear that. That wasn't the first thing we decided to start there, you know. Oh yes, when we had the gardens, we also had a zoo. Oh yes, we had a zoo and we had various animals, exotic creatures from all over the world. Including, now what's that creature called? A yak, that was it, a yak from Tibet. And we crossed it with a cow. We did various experiments to see how they would get on. Not very well is the answer, yes. Unfortunately, the creature went berserk. Yes. But the kangaroos, they were fine, and macaws, of course. Oh yes, they're beautiful creatures, lovely to watch them flitting around the trees. Now, apart from that, sport. I thought there weren't enough activities for the young men, so we built a cycle track. We had athletics competitions. People came from all around. And apart from that, in the gardens, you could come and listen to the band. My special band, and we had a beautiful livery for them. And did you know, this goes way back to your times. Oh yes, we had a uniform that looked like the forest, all beautiful green velvet for them to wear, the band, when they played on Sundays to entertain people. Yes, oh, wonderful. And they would play and people would dance. You know, the poet Thomas Hardy even came along, and apparently he thought very highly of it. He also thought rather highly of my daughter, which I didn't approve of terribly. A lot older than her, but that's another story. I shan't bore you with that. Now, overrated in my opinion. Very depressing, most of his work. However, forget that. We also had these wonderful dances, and I put an art gallery down at King John House, the lodge in Tollard Road. Yes, beautiful building and very good fine art we had there as well. And we had performances on the theatre. I wonder if that's still there. I do hope so. Beautiful painted background. Oh, it's a wonderful theatre. And we had performers from Salisbury. We had performers from Bournemouth. People came in their hundreds at the weekends. They came in charabancs. And we had everything arranged. If they came on horses or donkeys, Mrs. Ridout, they would be accommodated. There was fun for all. I wonder, you've never been, Mrs. Ridout, to one of our Llama Tree events. Alas, never mind. They are fine things and they keep the people occupied and happy. And finally, do you know, going back to these valuing ordinary things, one of my favourite objects in my collection in the museum is not the axe heads, the swords that we have found. It is a hagstone. A stone with a hole in it that you put around your neck, or you can hang in your bedroom. Now, one of my workers, a carter, he came up to me one day and said, General, I have something for you. I said, oh, what would that be, Robert? And he said, here. And he gave me this stone with a hole in it. I was going to show it to you, and I must have left my suitcase behind, but never mind. It's a beautiful long stone, hole in the middle. And do you know what they use those hagstones for? Anyone know?
Protection.
That's right. Protection from what, sir? Hags, that's right. And what are hags? Witches. Cranborne Chase folk, I have to say, are very superstitious. Perhaps you are as well, so I won't say too much about that, but anyway, but he let me have it, and there it is in my collection. So all types of things. I hope I have done my bit for the Cranborne Chase, and I would like to finish now by thanking you so much for your rapt attention to all our speakers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will leave you first, and then we will have an intermission, whilst you may go and get refreshments from the lodge next door. Another tradition we started at the lavatory. Everything is arranged for you. So, we will leave first of all, and then you will be escorted out. And we will see you back here after the intermission. And question time before the voting. Thank you.